Welcome back to John's Briefs, everyone. We're here again with Terry Johnson from Firearms Legal Protection. Got a juicy one for you today. We got a couple of videos that involve the display of a firearm, one by a law enforcement officer, one by a private citizen that was an idiot. Right. So I want to talk to Terry about when can I display or draw, point, and use a firearm. Today's video is brought to us by the generosity of Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners. You win the fight, and they will help you win the fight after the fight for the rest of your life. There's a link in the description for a coupon code for a discount for all active self-protection watchers. Terry, as always, man, I really appreciate you being here and dispensing knowledge. I hope you guys recognize, man, guys like Terry, you know, he charges, shall we just say, hundreds of dollars an hour for his advice. So if you come into his office and you sit across the desk from one of the best defensive attorneys around, you're going to shell out a whole bunch of money, and he gives this to us for free. So I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you.
Thank you, John. We appreciate you as well.
And so two videos that we want to talk about today. One out of Athens, Clarke County, where the officer, he's investigating, sees a guy skulking who matches the description of a perp from a domestic. So he's like, hey, man, show me your hands. Guy's like, no, I'm not going to show you my hands. The officer draws a gun on him and says, I said, show me your hands. Guy ignores him, all these other things, whatever. Then that one keeps going. Now, the other one was out of Utah, and that one was a mess. The guy obviously was in error, slaps the guy's kids around. When the guy comes up and says, hey, man, you ought to whip your butt for slapping my kids, he draws a gun on the guy, right? And then ends up shooting it at him, and he's facing a host of charges, and that's bad juju. So, Terry, let's talk first of all from one of the things that I said in the officer involved one is I went and looked for what is the general standard for an officer drawing a firearm on someone, and I couldn't find anything in public. Now, I found some policy positions. I had a bunch of friends who were in different departments send me their policies.
Sure.
But that's hard to find in public.
Well, you know, it's very interesting you mentioned that. You know, again, I'm licensed in Michigan, and Michigan has something on the books that says, you know, you can't charge an officer for drawing his firearm.
Really? It's just done. They can draw their firearm basically whenever they want.
Correct. Now, again, it's not those exact words, but that's pretty much what it means. But the interesting thing is, you know, an officer with a firearm is completely different than a member of the public. And
do you think that's because of the responsibility that we put on them, that we say, look, you've got to pursue deadly threats. You have to be in fights. You're going to pull people over, and you're going to go into houses with domestics. And because of that, we give you this much broader leeway to use your firearm?
Well, I think that's it, but I think really the officer is in a position, kind of like you said, he is the one that's going after people, you know. He's the one that's pulling someone over. He's the one that's, like I said, going after someone for domestic violence. Generally, while there's no quote-unquote duty to retreat in just about half the states or a little more across the country, a reasonable person who may see something will say, you know, I don't need to insert myself in that. The officer has to.
Right. They're duty bound to. That's the oath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So because they have that opportunity or that directive per se, sometimes they may have to pull a gun. You know, and you talk to some of your officer friends, as I have mine, sometimes you got those people that dare you. They say, oh, you're not going to pull a gun on me. You're not going to do this. You know, they don't want to listen. And sometimes, as you mentioned, for compliance, you may have to do that.
Right.
It's not the first thing an officer does when he gets to a car when he's pulled someone over. He generally just doesn't go and have his hand on the gun and pointing at someone, do this, do that. But if there's an issue with compliance, would you get out of the car? Would you do this? Would you do that? The officer may have to use that tool in order to help slow that situation down drastically.
Well, and I think of instances with officers like, you know, like a felony stop. You know, so they got somebody that's evaded them for some significant thing or caused a death in a traffic accident and then run. Then the officers may very well, rather than approach the car, do a felony stop, which means they open the doors, sit at their A-pillars, draw their guns, and draw the people out of the car. And you go, you know, can I guarantee there's a deadly threat in the car? No, but man, there's an awful lot of danger here. And so this gets reasonable. But I think about private citizens, and I want to know what your thoughts on this, Terry. So like, for instance, if I just answered my front door with a gun out, that could be problematic, right? I'm in my own property, whatever. But if I hear somebody on my property or something, say it's dark, it's late, something like that, and I come out and I go, man, this shouldn't be, something's weird, and I have a gun in my hand on my own property, I'm probably not going to have any problems with that. So there are times as a private citizen that I can have a firearm out that I don't know there's a deadly threat, but that I worry there could be one too. There just
Correct.
may be fewer than cops.
Well, correct. And again, in situations like that, you're not inserting yourself in the situation like the police are.
Right.
You know, you're in your own property, something's coming to you, whether it's that sound, whether it's someone coming to the door, you know, whether it's a visitor, you know, something's coming to you. Again, generally the police are going to the problem.
Right.
You know, they pull someone over, you go back to the car, you know, you run them through the system, you find out there's a felony warrant, you know. And I know a lot of people in the audience is going to say, okay, well, they've got a felony, you know, the police will just arrest them. But you have a lot of people that have the mentality, I'm not going to jail today.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, I'll go tomorrow, today's my sister's birthday, or, you know, I've got something to do this weekend, but I'm not going today.
Right.
And that becomes a huge issue for police because now there's a felony warrant out for you. The officer has to take you into custody.
And I mean, that is, at the end of the day, going to be backed up with a threat or an action of violence.
Absolutely.
If you refuse. It's just going to. And, but as a private citizen, we have a little different standard. But I think that depends on the state.
Well, correct. I mean, if, you know, there are people, obviously, I know that have warrants out. Can I arrest them? Well, in some states you can. Hey, I know you got a warrant. Come on, I'm going to take you down. But my purpose of saying that is, why would I?
Right.
Why would I put myself in
you
that
certainly
position?
wouldn't. But I mean, so as a private citizen, my standard of, okay, so wait a minute, I think that maybe this could get a little squirrely. I'm probably more likely to skedaddle than I am to go, no, I have to stand here and draw a firearm. Even if I have stand your ground, that's stupid for me to stand there and go, well, I might have a problem here that's a deadly threat, so I'm going to draw a firearm.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, you mentioned stand your ground. And again, we've had these discussions how people misconstrue what that means.
Right.
You know, my big thing is, from a police officer's perspective, and more so a private citizen than a police officer, do I have to put myself in this situation?
Right.
You
Well,
know?
and like so every state is so different. Here in Arizona, we have a statute, Arizona Revised Statute 13-421, for the defensive display of a firearm. It's fairly new. In fact, it's never been tried in court. We don't know what it means.
And you don't want to be the first one to go and set that precedent.
It's kind of funny.
that's
I
the key.
have another attorney in town who's a friend who said, hey, if you want to be the guy that tests it, I'll let you walk through the court with it, and it'll cost probably $60,000, $80,000, and we'll figure out what this law means. And I went, hard pass.
Yeah.
But
you don't want to be that first one.
But it says, so in Arizona, if I defensively display a firearm, again, we don't quite know exactly what that means, I can, against the threat of physical force, display a firearm in a protective manner.
Right.
But is that verbally informing? That's mentioned, showing it in a holster, or displaying it defensively. Now, again, these are vague terms that the legislature has not determined what they mean. And so the courts haven't hashed that out yet. But that's pretty good protection for me here in the state of Arizona.
Well, you say the state of Arizona, and think about it though. Where in Arizona?
Yeah,
So
it depends on the DA, right?
If you're in Flagstaff, is that the same standard that they're going to use in Phoenix? Is that something different than they're going to use in Tucson? What about Yuma? I mean, as you think
the
about
county,
that,
right?
Yeah, it depends on where you are because again, what's reasonable here is not necessarily reasonable somewhere else.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the finder of fact, be that the judge or the jury, determines whether or not that was reasonable at the end of the day.
Correct.
But I think every state is different in that as well from a legislative perspective, right? So your statutory law, to me, the rule is you have to know where you go. Now, I think for you and me, okay, so you're in Michigan. The law is a little different in Michigan than it is here in Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
And I travel all the time, all over the U.S., and if I take my understanding of Arizona law with me to Michigan, I can end up doing felony firearm pretty quick.
Real quick, and what that is, it's that means that it's an enhancer in Michigan. So if you use a firearm in the commission of a felony, it's a mandatory 2 years in prison first. So you do that 2 years, every day, every minute, every moment. Once that time is done, then you start time for anything else.
For whatever other thing
and it starts over. So you don't want to do that.
Yeah, they're consecutive.
Yeah. Because, I find a lot of people, like you said, when they travel, they presume the laws are the same. And the ones who it's really different are the ones that come from, let's say, the south to the north. Like, for example, in Michigan, you can't have a firearm in your vehicle, let's say in the glove compartment, under the seat, wherever, unless you've got a concealed permit. That's
Right.
it. In the South, it's completely different. In most places in the South, Texas, for example, it's just an extension of the home. So I've seen people from Texas, Alabama, et cetera, come up to Michigan. They're just driving around visiting relatives, and they've got a gun in the car. The police pull them over, and now all of a sudden they're looking at a 5-year felony.
All right. I've seen people that are from Georgia, and they decide to go take a vacation to New York City with the family, and
Oh, God.
they're going to go up, in one of the public buildings or something, and they go through, a detector, and they're, oh, where do I check my firearm? And New York's finest show up and go, hi, why don't you come with us? And they end up in prison. Go, wait, what do you mean? I've got a concealed carry permit. That's not valid in the state of New York. So you got to know your
Yep.
laws, man. You got to know your laws. So I would say this, to my experience as a trainer and carrier, be reticent to draw your firearm, right? You don't want to draw it too early. You get in a lot of trouble, but you don't want to draw it too late because you might end up dead.
Right. And that's the hardest thing, It's not necessarily what's in your mind at the time you're doing it, because, again, if you have to go down the route of trial, you may not get to explain
Right.
what's in your mind. It's what's in the minds of the 12 reasonable people, and was this reasonable to do? And it's kind of like the Monday morning quarterbacking that we all do with
Yeah.
our favorite football team, right?
Right.
Oh my God, why did you make that pass? Why did you do that? But in the quarterback's eyes, it's like, oh my God, this guy's rushing me. I got 2 seconds to get this off. I know
felt
this
this, saw
receiver
this.
can't run this pattern the right way. I had to do it. But me sitting on the sidelines or watching at home, I'm yelling and screaming, and I want him gone.
Yeah, it's true. So act reasonably, guys. Terry, appreciate the knowledge.
Thank you, John.